If you're a buyer in this market right now, chances are you're still going to be competing with other buyers for the best properties. If you do make an offer on a property in this market and you don't win, you may still be able to buy that property by turning your unaccepted offer into what's called a backup contract. Today, I want to share with you the top 5 things our team does to put our buyers in the best backup position possible. Number 1, say yes to being a backup immediately. As soon as you find out that you did not win, your seller of that property chose another buyer to work with, have your agent reach out to the listing agent and immediately find out what terms the seller will accept as a backup contract. Number 2, now get to work creating a winning backup offer. Have your agent find out exactly why you lost. What would have made the seller say yes to you in the first place? Revise your original offer with terms that you know will work for the seller and send it to the seller as soon as possible. Don't wait for the listing agent to simply counter that failed offer you already sent in hours or days ago. A couple of critical recommendations as you put this together. There's an exhibit that should be part of your offer called Backup Contingency Agreement. Your agent will know what this is, and they'll have some info that they need to gather about the primary contract and plant this into that. They need to know the names of the primary buyer, the binding date of their contract, and their upcoming closing date. Also, I'd recommend writing a special stipulation into your backup offer that clarifies that your due diligence period will actually start when the seller signs your backup contract, not when the seller gives you notice that the primary buyer is out of the way and now you're the primary buyer some days or weeks later. Start your due diligence the moment you go under backup contract status. All right, and that leads me to my third recommendation. Submit your backup offer as soon as possible. No later than a day after the primary buyer goes under contract and you find out that you didn't get the property is ideal. Don't wait any longer than that because the primary buyer and the seller are all in lockstep now and they're paying attention to each other and they've forgotten about all the other offers. Now remember, there may be other buyers who also didn't win and they may also want to be in backup. So just like when you were making your first offer on the property, the faster you submit something that the seller can sign, the faster they'll do exactly that. All right, number 4, when you go under contract as a backup buyer, start doing your due diligence right away. Have your agent reach out to the listing agent and ask a couple of questions first. See how everything is going with the primary buyer at this point. Maybe they've only been under contract for a couple of days, but there's always an impression of what's going on. So the first question your agent should ask is, when is this buyer's inspection? It may have already happened or it may be taking place right then. Have them also ask if they can get a copy of that buyer's inspection report and share with you when it's done. The next and the more important question would be, your agent would ask the listing agent this: on a scale of 1 to 10, how confident are you that the primary buyer is actually going to close this sale? It's really important. The answer to that may determine whether you are somebody who just sits patiently on the sidelines and waits for trouble in paradise, or do you start hustling and doing all the same due diligence the primary buyer is doing, just like an understudy might who is understudying the lead actress for a Broadway show. And that brings me to my 5th and final recommendation. Revise your backup contract to remove seller risk as soon as possible. If the listing agent told your agent that their confidence in the primary buyer is anything less than a 10, then start treating this situation as if you are the primary buyer. In other words, go ahead and do your own inspections on the property. Start going through full loan approval with your lender. Treat this as if this is your house. It's going to be your place you're going to live, your property. When you get your inspection report back, review it up and down, because guess what? The property as it's presented in this report, is exactly what you're going to be buying if you become the primary buyer. Here's what I mean. Buyers are still competing to win in this market. There's still very little inventory, and they may have even lost out on multiple other properties before winning this one late last year. What's different this year is they will experience some tinge of buyer's remorse right after going under contract for 2 main reasons. One, they're still going to be paying list price or higher if they have to compete for that home. And number 2, now versus this same time last year, they're paying way more in mortgage interest for less house than they were when they were shopping at this same time last year. So what do? They usually take this frustration out on the seller when it comes time to ask for repairs, especially. So you and your agent, you already saw this coming a mile away. So here's what you're going to do before they even have a chance to ask for a boatload of repairs. You're going to get comfortable with the idea of accepting the property in as-is condition as it's presented in your inspection report. Then you're going to revise your backup contract and say exactly that. Maybe even taking away your due diligence period altogether, because guess what? You should be done with your due diligence by now, right? You might even cut back your financing or appraisal contingency periods, or remove those altogether as well if you and your lender have reached a level of confidence that you're pretty much good to go. If you negotiated any seller-paid closing costs in your backup contract, consider finding that money somewhere else and removing that too. You want to present yourself as a way easier and more straightforward buyer to work with right before the primary buyer shows their true colors in their request for repairs. Now, here's what's going to happen when you do that. You submit your amendment to your contract to take away all these contingency periods and accept the property as is. The seller signs it. The very next few hours or the very next day, the primary buyer makes their repair request to the seller. And here's what their listing agent is going to reply to the primary buyer's agent. They're going to say, hey, these all look like legitimate requests, but we have a backup contract where the buyer is willing to take the property as is. And the seller then is just not going to be inclined to make any repairs or concessions for your buyer's repair request. So if your buyer still wants the property, we'll see you at the closing table. Here's what will happen next. It's one of two things. One, the primary buyer will move forward without the luxury of having the seller make those repairs or any concessions for those repairs. Or two, they will succumb to their own increasing buyer's remorse and they'll terminate their contract before the end of their due diligence period. If and when they do that, the property is yours. You're now the primary buyer and you pick right up where the other folks left off. All right. Now, as a listing agent, I am not in the business of encouraging termination of contracts that I helped my sellers and my clients put together with our own buyer customers, okay? I'm obligated to put forth a good faith effort and help everybody work everything out. But my sellers hired me to maximize their equity position by dealing with the best buyer who will create the least amount of hassle, okay? Now, I'm also obligated by law to present every offer to my clients. That includes backup offers. So if you want to have your agent send me a backup offer, I'm going to present it. Give me something my sellers would be thrilled to sign though, something that would make them want to go with you rather than put it back on the market if and when it doesn't work out with the primary buyer. Once you're under contract, show my sellers that you're still in the game and not just a bench warmer. Don't just sit around and wait for the primary buyer to randomly terminate, because that's not likely going to happen. Know what would make the primary buyer terminate as soon as possible. Get ahead of that and get that roadblock out of your backup contract as quickly as possible. If y'all have any questions, you know where we are. Shoot me an email to info@robsmith.com or call or text us at 404-906-5857.